All right, you're
All
recording.
right. Well, hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for our third session of the Terrell County Virtual Lunch and Learn series. I'm Jessica McCrory, the County Extension Agent in Terrell County. We hope you enjoy this series over the next few days. We will be recording this session, upcoming and past sessions for future viewing and for you to pass along to other folks. At the conclusion of the program, there will be an evaluation available. It's not too long, so please consider filling it out for us. The link to the evaluation is on the same page as the link for this Zoom session. And now we'll go to our program. Today we have Dr. Morgan Treadwell continuing with part 2 of talking about brush busters, focusing on prickly pear and cedar. So Dr. Treadwell, it's all yours once again.
Cool. Thank you, Jessica. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This is a really cool opportunity, and I'm so grateful that Jessica has made this possible for her landowners. And this is also a really good way to meet some new people. So I appreciate you tuning in. And please feel free to let me know if you have any questions. So this is a continuation of yesterday's program where we introduced what Brush Busters was all about, and then also talked a little bit about mesquite. Today we're going to cover managing prickly pear from a brush buster's perspective, and also redberry juniper. And then I added a few slides covering some resources available for y'all to look for more information. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So Brush Busters follows the individual plant treatment philosophy, commonly known as IPT. And believe it or not, when you are treating a prickly pear individual, it's essentially the same concept as using a foliar application spray. So instead of the leaf that you're spraying, you're looking to spray the pear pad. So the same concepts of using, let's say, for example, Sendero on a foliar application on mesquite, all of those same concepts are going to apply. So for example, the same nozzle size, the same coverage issues. The overall goal is to spray a healthy pear pad or a healthy leaf in order for that herbicide to be absorbed and translocated down throughout the plant. So again, this is a foliar pad spray application. And typically what we use when we are doing an IPT application, you'll use your product. A lot of prickly pear has been treated in the state of Texas with a product called Tordon 22K. That's kind of the tried and true approach for prickly pear, but there are some newer products available, and we'll cover that as we progress through this presentation. The other thing you want to make sure, it's absolutely crucial in a prickly pear herbicide application, is a surfactant. So prickly pear pads are obviously, it's a succulent species, so it's going to be very waxy, and they have this really waxy outer surface. And so we need to be able to penetrate that waxy surface. So in order to do that, we need to make sure the product stays on for a long period of time and that it beads up like water droplets on your car, for example, after you've waxed it. So we want our surfactant and our herbicide product to do the exact same thing when we're treating prickly pear. And then also a little bit goes a long ways. We want to include some type of spray marking dye so that there's a color to the herbicide you're putting on, so you can really tell what areas of that prickly pear have been treated and which areas have not. That way you have a pretty consistent coverage, and hopefully every single part of that prickly pear pad is getting treated. So these are some of the products that we have available for prickly pear. Prickly pear applications have really progressed in their chemistry and the overall products available. 10 or 20 years ago, we just had Tordon 22K as a product to use. Now there's 3 or 4 different products available on the market, and all that are very effective. But there are some differences in these products. So for example, regulated options that are regulated from TDA and require a pesticide license would include anything with picloram in it. So definitely Tordon 22K, Surmount, and also the newest product of them all, Mesoview. The one product that we have available for prickly pear management that is non-regulated, meaning the purchase of this product does not require a TDA license, is PastureGuard HL. Now, all of these products are all the same in terms of requiring a surfactant and a marking dye. And they're all at the same rates as well. So regardless of the product that you use, whether it's Tordon, Surmount, PastureGuard, or Mesoview, it's all mixed at 1%. Now remember, these are per volume measurements. So 1% of whatever your sprayer holds. So 1% of 5 gallons, 1% of 10 gallons. And then you're going to also add, don't forget the surfactant and the highlight blue dye or some type of spray dye. And then all 4 of these products, PastureGuard, Mesoview, Surmount, Tordon 22K, are all mixed with water. So you're going to add the water and bring it up to volume with that water. Some general rules of thumb when you are spraying prickly pear, you want to spray all the pads to their glistening, to their wet. Again, you want to avoid any type of herbicide dripping or dropping off. That's probably an excessive use of that product, and you're wasting a majority of it if you're spraying everything to the point where it's dripping off of it. With these 4 products, you can spray any time of the year. So this is the one exception to the foliar applications where we start to see some differences. Usually when you're using foliar application on leaf tissue, say for example mesquite, you have a very defined window of opportunity to where that foliar application is effective. It's just the opposite for prickly pear, and mostly because it's a succulent and growing pretty much all year long. You can spray these pads. It does outside of the growing season. So the general rule of thumb that we have is generally above 60 degrees Fahrenheit. Anything lower than that, you start to just see the translocation of nutrients not occurring as quickly or at as an optimized rate as they usually are when, excuse me, when temperatures are fairly high. The other rule of thumb is you do not want to spray those prickly pear pads after a recent rainfall when they're already wet. So what's going to happen there is that herbicide is just going to run off of the prickly pear pad. Sometimes it will help if you can time it to where you spray and then it's followed by a light rain. You don't want any type of gully washing rainfall event or major rainfall event, but it helps, especially if you're using a product that has a Tordon 22K or picloram active ingredient in it. Picloram is soil active. And so a light rainfall following your herbicide application will help translocate that herbicide down from the prickly pear pads and into the soil where it can become more effective. And obviously, since it's a foliar application, you want to use a larger nozzle size. So we recommend that X8 nozzle size. And just the same with any brush density component, the higher the brush density or the higher the amount of prickly pear per acre, the more you're going to increase your cost. And that is specifically due from a labor perspective. So you start getting at right around 300 to 400 prickly pear individuals per acre, and you start to lose your cost efficiency starts to taper off when it comes to treating on a per acre basis from an IPT perspective. So any higher densities than 300 to 400 plants per acre, you need to probably consider a broadcast application. And obviously that's usually in the form of an aerial application from a helicopter or a fixed wing. Now this kind of gives you a general idea of how successful these herbicide prickly pear treatments are. This is data going back to the late 1990s, where the founding fathers of brush busters compared a lot of herbicide products. Of course, Tordon 22K had been on the market for probably 10 years prior to this, but this is right around when Surmount was first starting to come out. And so obviously comparing the same rates but different products showed that Surmount was pretty consistent with Tordon 22K, and obviously that morphed into a reliable option for prickly pear mortality. Since then, we have came up with some newer products, particularly Mesaview. So this is looking at average mortality prickly pear 1 year after application, after treatment. And what we've done here is we have collected 9 different research sites across Texas. So these include the San Angelo area, Stephenville area, Central Texas by Brady or McCullough County. We had 9 sites collectively pulled together. And these were sites that were treated in 2015 and 2016, but this is only looking at their 1-year response data. So just looking at this graph, starting from the left, we've got Mesaview at 0.8%, and then we have Mesaview at 1.2%, compared to the standard industry of 1% Surmount and 1% Tordon 22K. Now, the reason we've got 2 different rates of Mesaview is because when this product first came out, we did not know what the sweet spot was in terms of herbicide efficacy. And so what we usually typically do is run a rate study trying to find the most optimized rate in terms of plant mortality. So how low can we go without sacrificing that overall mortality? And you could see here the standard error or the variability associated within these different treatment sites is pretty close for the Mesaview and the Surmount. But when we start to see the variability associated with Tordon 22K 1 year after treatment, that's when things slowly start to fall apart. And then you can also see that 1 year after treatment, Tordon 22K was significantly lower than the other treatments in this study. Now, this is looking at the same data, okay, the same 9 sites that were treated in 2015 and 2016, but this is looking at 2 years after application, not 1 year. And you can see the same trends hold up. We see a little bit higher amounts of plant mortality with the Mesaview rates of 0.8 and 1.2%. Surmount at 1% is still very effective, but then we start to drop off a little bit in terms of statistical significance with the Tordon 22K at 1%. And then also the variability associated with Tordon 22K, looking at these 9 different sites that have varying degrees of plant community components, precipitation regimes, and soil types. You can see Tordon 22K just kind of falls apart a little bit as it's compared to the other treatments in the study. Okay, again, this is looking at an IPT research from 6 different sites. This time it was applied in 2017. Again, this is 1 year after application. We've got some different rates of Mesaview again. We've got a 0.25% rate, a 0.5% rate, a 3/4 rate, and then the full 1%. And then also testing it against the standard of Surmount 1% and Tordon 1%. And again, we see a lot of promise with the 3/4 rate, but that 1% rate of Mesaview by far yielded not only high amounts of plant mortality on prickly pear 1 year after treatment, but also the variability and the error associated with those 6 sites was significantly lower than all the other treatments, meaning Mesaview is more reliable or appears to be more reliable with different precipitation regimes and different soil types. So this is a time-lapse photo progression showing how quickly Mesaview works. Now, if you recall the last couple of slides, when we're looking 1 year after treatment, Mesaview was already showing anywhere from 80 to 90% plant mortality compared to Tordon 22K. And we decided to take a closer look at that. So the top photos that you see from January to July shows Mesaview, and then the bottom row that you see is Tordon 22K. And then this is the exact same site. Plants were just treated with different herbicides. They were side by side in the same pasture. And you can see by July, that prickly pear that was treated with Mesaview is already starting to decay. It's falling apart. It's really just started its overall desiccation. Whereas with the Tordon 22K, that herbicide is still working. It's still producing mortality at the end of the 2-year period, but at a much slower rate than what Mesaview can do. This is a video, again, showing the time lapse of how quickly we can start to see that overall desiccation, yellowing, the speed of yellowing, as it compares Mesaview to Tordon 22K throughout the calendar year. And so this just kind of is an indicator that if you as a landowner are looking for a fast acting herbicide, you want to see quick results, then you might want to consider some different products that are now available that significantly increase the rate of plant mortality. And typically that plant mortality is achieved within 1 year after application. These are some pictures from our research sites across West Texas. So this is IPT looking at 4 months after treatment on the left and 8 months after treatment on the same research site in Tom Green County, just outside of San Angelo. And this is Mesaview at 1%. This is a picture of one of the research plots where the treated prickly pear is on the right side of the photograph. And then that on the left side of the photograph between those 2 PVC pipes is the untreated barrier zone that we have between our research plots. And this was 8 months after treatment. And still Mesaview at 1%. This is the same set of photographs in Scurry County, except instead of looking at different times after application, this is looking at different products. So again, looking at Tordon 22K on the left side of your screen at a 1% rate, 4 months after treatment, compared to Mesaview at a 1% rate 4 months after treatment. Again, I'm not saying that Tordon 22K is not effective as it is in plant mortality, regarding plant mortality. It just takes a little bit longer and slower amount of time or longer amount of time for that herbicide to be translocated throughout the prickly pear plant. This is in Runnels County, and this is looking at Mesaview 1% 4 months after treatment compared to untreated prickly pear that we have between our barrier zones or our open spaces between our plots. Again, 4 months after treatment, this was started in 2018, and 2018 was a really good year rainfall wise. And so obviously we found when we're above average precipitation, our prickly pear plots always look really, really good, high amounts of plant mortality, and then also faster speeds of yellowing and overall desiccation or plant mortality. Now, as it relates to brush busters, the IPT herbicide approach is probably the most popular, but you can manually and successfully remove prickly pear in terms of an IPT. And so this is an option in brush busters. It's probably one of the most effective ones if you can remove all of that prickly pear. So using a grubbing hoe or a shovel and digging up as much root material as possible. The thing about prickly pear roots is they're oftentimes very shallow. And so it doesn't take a whole lot of digging to effectively dig everything up. But the biggest thing is you want to remove all the pads and the roots from that area. Now, if you remove everything and you dig everything up and then you just pile it right there, prickly pear will resprout. So every single thorn on a prickly pear pad is capable of forming a new root and digging and establishing itself back down into the soil surface. So if you don't remove everything from the site that you've just treated, it will reestablish and grow into new plants rather quickly within, probably a couple of months or so, if the soil is soft enough and precipitation is not limiting. Okay, So now we're going to cruise right into red-berried juniper and treating red-berried juniper as it relates to our brush busters approach and philosophy. So we all know red-berried juniper too well, especially in y'all's neck of the woods in Terrell County. However, when we start to get into kind of the eastern side of the Edwards Plateau and a little bit more into the hill country area, folks can easily mistake ash juniper for red-berried juniper and vice versa. So plant ID is really crucial when you are working within the juniper species. And especially because we've got varying terms of regrowth. So red-berried juniper is a resprouting plant, whereas ash juniper is not. And that can play a huge role and have a large effect on your pocketbook if you have incorrectly ID'd these two species. So we want to make sure that we know what we're working with when it comes to the juniper species. Red-berried juniper, its classic identifiable characteristic is these white glands that are on the leaf. And so these white glands, you can, if you take a closer look at the leaf, you should be able to see it. Some are more prominent than on others, but you'll probably always find some of these white specks on that leaf when you're looking at it. Some options for red-berried juniper, it does resprout when top killed. So it will, just like mesquite, it will come back from below ground basal buds. It's capable of forming a multi-stem trunk. And so the options that we have then are soil spray method with a Velpar or any type of gun, and then a foliar IPT application, and then also that cut stump spray method that we talked about yesterday is also very effective. Just like mesquite, like I said, red-berried juniper has a below ground bud zone, and so this is the bud zone on a red-berried juniper. This is where we are targeting that herbicide. This is where it needs to be translocated down in order to avoid any future resprouting from the basal zone. Now, the soil spot spray can be pretty effective because it's just like a drench gun. If you're drenching sheep, you set a set dose rate, and then you walk up to your tree and you treat the soil at the base of the tree. And then, of course, the soil works as the carrier and moves that herbicide down into the tree to where those basal buds are. There are some general rules of thumb if you are looking to use this method. For example, a red-berried juniper tree that's less than 6 feet tall, we recommend using 2 cc's per every 3 feet of height. Okay, and if you're dealing with something that's greater than 6 feet tall, you need to use 4 cc's for every 3 feet of height. Again, this is a soil spot spray method, so it doesn't matter how large that red-berried juniper tree is, but we do see a cutoff rate at that 6 foot threshold mark. You also want to add 2 ounces of dye with that for every gallon of spray mix. And you want to apply to the soil right under the drip line of that particular tree. And of course, smaller trees in height will have a smaller drip line to treat. Larger trees will have a much larger drip line. So you just need to make sure that you're using the right amount of product and sprayed directly under that drip line. Another thing to keep in mind when using the soil spot spray method is it is active in the soil and therefore can move away and in the soil. So, for example, this is a picture of a plant community where the juniper was treated with Velpar, but you can see that live oak tree suffered some leaf scorch and some leaf damage because the Velpar moved through the soil and was translocated back down to the live oak. And so you want to make sure that when you are using Velpar that there are no desirable species in the area or close to the trees that you're treating, because it will move off target, especially depending on your soil type and also depending on any large rainfall events. Our next popular brush busters application for red berry juniper is the leaf spray. And our products that we use for that is Tordon 22K, a marking or spray dye, and a surfactant. Red berry juniper has a real waxy leaf as well, similar to mesquite. And so we need to make sure that we use a high quality non-ionic surfactant where that herbicide will stay put on the leaf until the tree absorbs it through its translocation of nutrients. So the recommended rate for treating red berry juniper with a foliar or leaf spray less than 3 feet tall, we recommend Tordon 22K at 1%, a surfactant at 1/4%, and a marking dye at 1/4% as well. And then you're just going to bring it up to volume with water. So no diesel, no basil oil, nothing like that. Just mix it all with water. Again, you want to thoroughly cover every part of the leaf. You want to avoid any runoff or anything like that. You want to spray to glisten, basically. You don't want to spray after a rainfall. So for example, if those leaves are wet, whether it's from a high dewy morning or from rain, you want to wait till those leaves are dry and ready to soak up the herbicide. And again, you want to steer clear of anything that's desirable browse, desirable trees that could be susceptible to any type of drift. This is looking at some 2-year after application effectiveness, comparing the leaf spray to the soil spot spray in several counties, or a few different counties throughout the state of Texas. And when we combine all these different counties, looking at leaf spray versus soil spot spray, we see it's pretty comparable to overall plant mortality 2 years after treatment. Again, with the leaf spray, you really can't effectively spray anything that's taller than you are. So you want to make sure that you get 100% coverage of that herbicide on any type of that juniper that you're spraying in all of the leaf, because if you miss a few leaves here and there, for example, the top of the plant, because you can't reach it, then that individual will not die and it will easily come back, very similar to how mesquite is if you have poor coverage or inconsistent coverage. Another option for red berry juniper, and we mentioned this yesterday, since red berry juniper is a hardwood species, you can use a cut stump spray. So you want to cut that above ground stem close to the soil surface. You want a flat cut, and then you want to immediately treat it with Tordon 22K. Now, this is a little bit different than the rates we talked about yesterday. Because it is red berry juniper, we're going to stick with Tordon 22K at 4%. So don't use remedy when you are treating red berry juniper. It has to be picloram. And then you're going to add some surfactant and some dye and bring it to volume with water, because it is picloram. So no diesel, nothing like that. Just picloram and water, surfactant and dye. And like I said, you want to treat that stump immediately after cutting it. Don't wait a week, don't wait a day, don't wait another hour. Have it be a very routine pattern of cutting and spraying almost immediately. Another option with red berry juniper that will build a lot of character is hand grubbing. If you've got any type of Pulaski or anything like that, you can grub up smaller seedling cedars or juniper species. Anything that's well established or that is probably older than 3 years, more mature than 3 years, you're going to be dealing with a massive root system. But if you can get after it when it's young and in its seedling vulnerable stage, you can effectively remove it by hand. Obviously, the cost to hand grub red berry juniper is phenomenally high, and positively linearly increases with the plants per acre. And so we see this trend with any type of plant density where you're above 300 to 400 plants per acre, and it's probably no longer cost efficient to use this individual plant treatment or brush busters approach. Okay, Now, as we kind of wrap up on the half hour, I want to cover some general resources that y'all can use to further your brush busters education or your herbicide management applications. So the first and foremost, we have since moved Brush Busters online as an online course that's available through Texas A&M AgriLife Extension digital education format. It can be found at agrilifelearn.tamu.edu. And this course is $25. And what we basically did is we took our Brush Busters course that we commonly teach at Beef Cattle Short Course, and we just converted it to an online format due to COVID-19. So you will find every single thing you need to know about Brush Busters, as far as the equipment goes, as far as nozzles, surfactants, everything you need to successfully implement a Brush Busters application from start to finish, you will find in this class. And then we also run through some species-specific approaches using Brush Busters. So red-berried juniper, all juniper species are on there, prickly pear's on there, mesquite's on there. And then there's also some eastern side of the state species like McCartney Rose, and then also Weisach for our southern Texas landowners as well. But Brush Busters is online, and it's also available for CEUs too. So if you're needing CEUs for your license, you can sign up to do Brush Busters online and earn 3 CEUs for credit. Another option that I recommend is ERM 1466, and you can find this at our AgriLife bookstore website. ERM 1466 is basically the Bible for chemical and herbicide brush control. We just barely went through a 2020 revision, and so this particular publication is 100% relied upon by not only our AgriLife extension specialists and research specialists, but also by NRCS. So if you have signed up for an EQIP contract or anything like that, and you're using herbicide, NRCS will rely on this ERM 1466 for the best strategy for your herbicide application. And of course, it's free. You can get it as a PDF from agrilifebookstore.org. And what I do is I keep it as a PDF on my iPhone, on my iPad, and it allows me to rapidly pull herbicide recommendations up while I'm in the field, or just have it readily available. Obviously, of course, you can print off a hard copy if need be, but having it on your smartphone devices is also pretty efficient as well. And here's our AgriLife bookstore where you can download that, agrilifebookstore.org. And then when you get to this is the home page. You can just type in ERM 1466 in that search bar at the top right hand part of your screen, and it will take you directly to that location for downloading the PDF of it. You'll have to add it to your cart, and it acts like it's going to charge you, but they don't really. If you download it electronically, it is completely free. So ERM 1466, again, it's used as a USDA technical guide. It's limited to selected species and recommendations, so you can search for herbicide recommendations by species. It includes control ratings of how effective the recommended herbicide strategies are. And like I mentioned, it's updated frequently. So this recent revision of 2020 includes specific management approaches for Western honey mesquite, or excuse me, the Torreana mesquite. And also it includes the MesoView recommendations for prickly pear. So as soon as we get new recommendations or newer products that we have thoroughly researched and vetted through our small plot scale research, once we think it's reliable recommendations, we try to integrate it into ERM 1466 as quickly as possible. And like I said, you can search for it by species, by weed or brush species. Here are those control ratings that I talked to you about. So very high means it was anywhere from 76 to 100% mortality rating on all of the research conducted by AgriLife Extension and research. And then it also has a list of common chemical and product names of herbicides. So many times these herbicides come out of patent and they become generically available, and then they get a new name, even though it's the same active ingredient or acid equivalent. So this is kind of a short list of the different names that are associated with herbicides and products. And everything that we get for ERM 1466 is taken directly from the label. So here's a label for Tordon 22K, and this goes right into our ERM 1466. We also have some common measurement conversions and a guide to the quantity of herbicide formulation, just so you don't have to do the math, or you can double check your math. So for example, if you've got 1 gallon and the recommended herbicide rate for mixing is 1%, then you're going to need 1.28 ounces of that herbicide formulation. Just makes it easier to reference how much product you're going to need if contemplating a herbicide application. So here's our layout of what ERM 1466 looks like. We also have some general remarks regarding the timing of application or any other details regarding the application, maybe what nozzle to use or what rates to use it at. And then also notice we beefed up the mesquite application to include the Western Torreona mesquite as well. And all of these recommendations also have the aminocyclopyrachlor herbicide recommendations in them as well, commonly known as MAT28. Okay, so agrilifebookstore.org to find ERM 1466. Another quick download that you can get at the bookstore while you're there for ERM 1466 is the quick reference for common rangeland and pasture herbicides. That's also known as ESC 046. This is just a one-page reference that includes the active ingredient, the product name, any grazing restrictions, and whether a simple yes or no for if a pesticide applicator license is required. I keep one of these in my pickup, at my office, on my phone, on my iPad, because it's just such a handy reference to use if you're contemplating using herbicides. Another option too in our new normal of COVID-19 and living virtually are our Texas Range webinars. These are free, there are CEUs available, and they're all archived. So these Texas Range webinars have been going on for, probably for at least 10 years now or so. And you can find these range webinars at naturalresourcewebinars.tamu.edu. And like I said, they're all archived. So if you want to find something specific, you can go back and watch something regarding, whatever it is you're looking for. So we typically have guest speakers that do these. So for example, Tiffany Lashmit, all of her AgWAS recordings are also on here if she gave any type of guest speaker presentation for our Texas Range webinar. And like I said, CEUs are available here as well. New Mexico State University also has their own weed and brush recommendations. And since y'all are on the western side of the state, there are very many similar plant communities and species. And so you can download this for free as well at New Mexico State University. And it has a very similar layout to our ERM 1466. It's basically the same equivalent of it. And honestly, you probably could just Google chemical weed and brush control for New Mexico, and you would be able to find a free PDF of it, since that New Mexico State website's kind of cumbersome. Okay, well, that's going to do it for me. I appreciate everyone tuning in and taking the time to support our AgriLife programs. And a big thank you to Jessica for hosting this and having me on. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Treadwell. And I'll be sure to add all those links that you did for the resources with this video onto the AgriLife or the Terrell County website. So make it easier for people to click to it and get to them.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. If there's not any questions, well, thank you all for attending this session of the Terrell County Virtual Lunch and Learn series. Just a reminder about filling out the evaluation. Again, it can be found on the same page as a Zoom link for this session under events on the Terrell County AgriLife page. This evaluation will be for both parts of Brushbusters yesterday and today. And thank you again, Dr. Treadwell. We'll be back next Tuesday with Texas Parks and Wildlife District Biologist Chase McCrory to talk about prescribed fire, and hope to have y'all back next week. Thanks.